We now are in the spiritual summer season of JAHUAH's plan for the redemption of his people. It is a time for sowing seeds and pulling weeds, preparing and maintaining the land for the next harvest. Joel specifies the means by which JAHUAH is going to restore the blessing of harvest, the latter rain, which represents the rain of ripening before the harvest. Joel 2:19. Yes, JAHUAH will answer and say to his people, "Behold, I send you grain and wine and oil, and you shall be satisfied with it, and I will no more make you a curse. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in JAHUAH your Eloah, for he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of JAHUAH your Eloah, that hath dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed." Soon the latter rain will begin to fall as JAHUAH restores his times and division of time to his chosen people. JAHUAH restores the grain, wine, and oil, the first fruits of the land, and the appointed times in which he has guarded and is now offering them to us in gladness. Today, we overcomers are called by the prophets and by Moses to carefully examine the foundation on which we stand. According to the biblical prophets, all things of the kingdom of heaven are about to be revealed and restored through the manner Eloah declared in Ezekiel 20:41. In a scent of pleasant aroma, I will favorably receive you, in my leading you from out of the peoples, and to take you from out of the places in which you were dispersed in them. I shall be sanctified in you before the eyes of the people. The restoration of JAHUAH's division of time is upon us. The rightful appointments for meeting with our Creator are being revealed to his latter day, latter rain ecclesia. Those working in the fields of his word, they are to bring about the restoration with their oil-filled lamps, shining its light on the world. We are to restore the provisions of first fruits for the final celebration of the wedding of the Lamb and his prepared bridal Sukkot. Jeremiah 31, starting with verse 12. They will come and shout for joy on the height of Zion, and they will be radiant over the bounty of JAHUAH, over the grain and the new wine and the oil, and they shall never languish again. Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old together. For I will turn their mourning into joy, and will comfort them and make them rejoice from their affliction. And I will fill the soul of the priests with fatness, and my people shall be satisfied with my goodness, says JAHUAH. Shalom, shalom, everyone. Today we're going to talk about offering up the first fruits of wine and oil. These long forgotten feasts are being restored in the end times, just as prophesied by Zechariah, Enoch, and others. We are this end time generation where the restoration is once again happening. Exodus 22:29. You shall not delay giving the fullness of your crops and the juices of your vintage. Deuteronomy 18:4. You shall give him the first fruits of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil. When JAHUAH gives instructions more than once on a subject, it would be prudent for us to listen. There are many scriptures where JAHUAH instructs the giving of our first fruits to him. Although, do we really understand these scriptures? And most importantly, how do we know when to observe these days? Let us ponder this as we hunt for tidbits of discernment in the word of our Creator. We're going to look back for a moment at the time when JAHUAH was giving Moshe the words of the covenant up on Mount Sinai. This covenant was an agreement between JAHUAH and the Hebrew nation, in which JAHUAH promised to protect and bless them if they kept his law and were faithful to him. They were entering a contract with our Creator. Exodus 20, starting with verse 1. And Eloah spoke all these words, saying, I am JAHUAH your Eloah, who has brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. JAHUAH then proceeds to give the terms of this covenant contract to Moshe. You shall have no other Eloah before me. You shall not make for yourselves any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heavens above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow yourself down to them, nor serve them. For I, JAHUAH your Eloah, am a jealous Eloah, rendering the sins of the fathers upon the sons to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. Boy, it sure didn't take the Israelites much time to break that promise, now did it? Was it just a few weeks later and they were building that golden calf, their image of Saturn, their Saturn god that they've lifted up ever since? JAHUAH goes into great detail as to what is expected of his chosen people. He breaks down marital relations, how to treat your neighbor's ox, not bearing false witness, etc. Basically, he instructs us how to be principled people in our relationships with our spouse, neighbors, and most importantly, with him. JAHUAH then goes on to instruct the caretaking of the land. Exodus 23, starting with verse 10. And you shall sow your land 6 years, and shall gather in the fruits of it. But the 7th year you shall let it rest, and let it alone. This is the Shemitah year, so that the poor of your people may eat. And what they leave, the animals of the field shall eat. In the same way you shall deal with your vineyard and your olive grove. You shall do your work 6 days, but on the 7th day you shall rest, so that your ox and your beast of burden may rest, and the son of your handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed. Next, our Creator sets up some appointments for us to meet with him. We are his children. JAHUAH wants us to visit with him in celebration. The secular world makes its appointments for gathering at Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, etc. Days that lift themselves up. JAHUAH wants us to meet with him in joy and celebration, to lift him up in thanks for all that he has supplied. Pay close attention to the following instructions. Exodus 23:14. And you shall keep a feast to me 3 times a year. The holiday of unleavened bread keep to do. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, just as I gave charge to you according to the time of month of the new produce. For in it you came forth out of Egypt. You shall not appear before me empty. A holiday of the harvest of the first produce, what we call the Shavuot season, you shall observe your works. Whatever you sow in your field, and a holiday of completion at the conclusion of the year, in the gathering of your works from out of your field. So let's look at that again, because he's saying a holiday of harvest of the first produce. So we know that the second holiday, the second feast that we're to come before JAHUAH is at Shavuot, when we weigh the wheat, the first of the wheat. So from waving the first fruits to start the Omer count to the waving of the wheat, Shavuot, is a count, and that is the first part of this Shavuot season. And then he goes on to say, you shall observe your works. So we're waving our works before JAHUAH, whatever you sow in your field. So not just the grain, and not just the wheat or the barley, and the holiday of completion at the conclusion of the year, in the gathering of your works from out of your field. So at the conclusion of the year, this isn't the conclusion of the calendar year, but the conclusion of the harvest season, the harvest part of the year. So at the conclusion, we are in the gathering of your works from out of your field. This is Sukkot, the final pilgrim feast that we are to meet with JAHUAH. Exodus 23:17, 3 times in the year all your males shall appear before me. Okay, so these 3 feasts are called the Pilgrim Hog Feast, as the men were to travel to the temple in Jerusalem to come before JAHUAH. Hog also means to move in a circular motion, as all of the Creator's days are set in a circular pattern. So the word Hag comes from the root word Hagag, and that means to properly move in a circle. That is specifically to march in sacred procession, to observe a festival, by implication to be giddy, celebrate, dance, keep, hold a solemn feast holiday. So these are the 3 main holidays that we're told to come before JAHUAH. And again, the first one is Passover, second one is Shavuot, or Feast of Weeks, and the third Sukkot, or the Feast of Ingathering. So twice we are given these instructions that all the males need to attend. Once in verse 14 at the opening of this set of instructions, and again in verse 17 at the closing statement. So within these verses of 14 through 17, JAHUAH has given us instructions of 3 feasts that we are to meet with him. But let's take a closer look at the beginning words of Exodus 23:16. A holiday of the harvest of the first produce you shall observe of your works, whatever you sow in your field. It is interesting that we are instructed to observe the first fruit produce of whatever we sow in the field. If this were just for grain, it would have been specified. But remember, we're supposed to bring the best of the wine and oil too. You shall not delay giving the fullness of your crops and juices of your vintage. Deuteronomy 18:4, and you shall give him the first fruit of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil. So taking a closer look at the Apostolic Bible Polyglot and the Septuagint, perhaps we can glean a tittle more. Exodus 34:22, a holiday, a feast day, a Moed Hag day of a period of 7s, plural, 7s. You shall observe to me the beginning of the harvest of wheat, and a hog of gathering being in the middle. So this word middle means middle point of time, to be halfway over, about in the midst of the year. Let me read that again. We're reading from Exodus 34:22. And a holiday of a period of 7 you shall observe to me, the beginning of the harvest of wheat, and a holiday of gathering being in the middle, to be halfway of the year. 3 times of the year every male of yours shall appear before JAHUAH, the Eloah of Israel. That's verse 23. So let's take a look at this. What is JAHUAH talking about here now? Because we know that we're to come before JAHUAH for the 3 pilgrim feasts: Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. He already told us that in Exodus 23:17. And yes, sometimes JAHUAH will repeat things for us so that we can get it set into our pea brains, just like he did up here with verses 14 and 17 in Exodus 23. Yet, in the scriptures prior, JAHUAH is talking about first fruits, not the pilgrim feasts like he is doing in Exodus 23. So isn't it curious that JAHUAH would just arbitrarily throw in, hey, by the way, you're to meet with me 3 times a year, if he were only reminding us of the 3 main pilgrim feasts that we know and love as, again, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. That would be completely out of context on the subject matter, which is first fruits. So, perhaps JAHUAH is telling us something more. In Exodus 34:22, we are informed that there is a feast of gathering in the middle of the year, versus at the end or conclusion of the year, as we are told in Exodus 23 concerning Sukkot. And let's just refresh ourselves on what Exodus 23:16 says. It says, in a holiday of the harvest of the first produce, you shall observe of your works, whatever you sow in your field, and a holiday of completion at the conclusion of the year. So, see, it's totally different. He's telling us in 34:22 that it's at the middle. So we are to come together at the end of the harvest year, at the end of the harvest season, after all the produce is gathered in. We are also instructed to assemble together with the first of our produce, whatever it may be. And would not that produce gathered in include the new wine and new oil? Look at what JAHUAH is telling us. This feast at the conclusion of the year is a holiday of completion. After all the harvest is gathered in, we celebrate at the conclusion, not the middle of the year. Now we know for a fact that Pesach is in the beginning of the year. And as we just read, Sukkot is considered to be at the conclusion. Feast of First Grains, or Shavuot, is in the middle of the 3rd month, but clearly that is not the middle of the year, although it is the beginning of the feast cycle for the first fruit harvests. So we call it the Shavuot season. 3 sets of 7 sevens we are to count, and recall that Moshe was called up the mountain 3 times during this harvest season. Deuteronomy 16:9. And you shall count 7 weeks to yourself, beginning to count the 7 weeks from the time you began to put a sickle to the grain. These are our instructions as to when we start counting toward the time to bring in the next harvest. Beginning with the barley and moving on to wheat, we are told to count 7 sevens. When we start counting is a battle in itself. So let's then examine first the spiritual aspects of the set-apart feast days. We are instructed to count 7 sevens, not only once, but 3 times. 7 sevens between barley and wheat, 7 sevens between wheat and wine, and 7 sevens between wine and oil. This count is so important because to seven oneself means to take an oath. We are counting through the harvest season. 3 groups of sevens. We as the bride are readying ourselves in steps of oaths, deciding and contemplating as to whom we will follow, JAHUAH or HaSatan. One must understand the importance of the marriage rituals and ceremonies that our Creator's feast days represent. As we walk through and recreate these ceremonial steps each year, year after year, until the time of the return of our kinsmen, where we will have been well practiced and found worthy to be a part of the wedding feast. The importance of this knowledge is paramount in understanding JAHUAH's covenant contract with his people. Just as there are 3 pilgrim feasts required, the Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, there are 3 main parts to the wedding ritual, or what I call the 3 main events. These are the arrangement, betrothal, and the wedding. Each of these stages have components that must be accomplished before moving on to the next stage, and work to be done in preparation for the 3 main events. Within and including the 3, we have 8 steps total in walking through the progression of marriage from start to finish. JAHUAH gives us explicit instructions for each of these feasts and calls us to observe them as a holy convocation, a Kodesh Mikra. The word holy, Kodesh, a sacred place or thing, from the root word Kadash, which means make, pronounce, or observe as clean, clean ceremonially or morally. Consecrate, sanctify, prepare, dedicate, be hallowed, be holy, be sanctified, be separate. And convocation, mikra, means to be called out, a public meeting, a rehearsal. Thus, the words holy convocation lends itself to the idea of a consecrated, sanctified rehearsal. What are we rehearsing? We are rehearsing none other than our selection, betrothal, and wedding to our kinsman prince and future king. Step 1, the arrangement, the bride selection. This happens at Pesach, at the Passover. This is where the bride price is paid. The first thing that happens is a bride is selected, and the groom's family sends a representative to offer the bride's family a bride price. This happened for the early rain ecclesia at the original Passover, and for the latter rain ecclesia at the Messiah's crucifixion. In both incidents, the bride price was blood, a high price indeed. And it happened at midnight. JAHUAH struck all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive that was in the prison, also all the firstborn of the cattle. But I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish to you an everlasting covenant. For this is my blood, the blood of the new covenant, the one for many, being poured out for the release of sins. Once the bride is selected and the price is paid, the couple begins their courtship. I know that seems a little backwards from how modern men and women come together. Today we date before committing to marriage, but in the days of antiquity, a marriage was looked upon as a business transaction, many times planned at or even before the birth of the child. The bride is chosen and paid for. We are now progressing from a 7-day festival count to a count of 7 sevens. Step 2, the courtship, counting the Omer. The courtship then begins with the counting of the Omer, which the first fruit offering of the earliest crop, barley, starts it off. We are now free to wave the sheaf because we have been selected and paid for. The first set of sevens is an oath to become betrothed. This waving would not have been done until after the bride was selected, not until after the Feast of Unleavened Bread was completed. We have another video that you can go check out after you watch this one called The Counting of the Omer. And it goes into more detail as to when we start counting. The Creator does all things in order, and all of his meetings are set. They're set appointed times. They don't wander through the calendar. They are set. If we were to wave the early grain prior to its set time, we would be out of order and offering up strange fire to Eloah. And we know how well that went for Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. It is also confirmed in the Dead Sea Scrolls that according to the practices of the priests, the counting of the Omer began after the completion of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which would fall on the 26th day of the first month. Now, why doesn't JAHUAH just tell us to start counting on the 26th day of the first month? Because he is encompassing all 3 counts of the 7 sevens in his instructions. This is a period of counting. That is the whole point of why he doesn't just say, oh, you start on the 26th, and then you start on the 15th, and then you... No, because it's a period of counting 7 sevens. And he's also testing us to see if we're going to follow his instructions. Remember, even Moses was left out of the promised land for not following JAHUAH's instructions to the T. In Exodus 23:16, a holiday of the harvest of the first produce you shall observe of your works, whatever you sow in your field. This isn't just about the grain count. This is also made more clear in Numbers 28. Numbers 28:26 really hits it home, because it tells us, and in the day of the new produce, whenever you shall bring a new produce sacrifice of the period of sevens to Eloah. So not a or the produce sacrifice, but whenever you shall bring the sacrifice of periods of 7. So it's more than one. It will be a holy summoning to you. All servile work you shall not do. So we can see that the use of this word whenever lends itself to being more than once. How can it be whenever if we're already given the instructions on the specific day, the day of Shavuot, to bring the first fruits offering? That is, unless there is more than one period of sevens. Offering up the first fruits of the land was not a new concept on Sinai. After the flood, Noah was given instructions on the first fruits to pass on to the generations which followed him. We read from the book of Jubilees, chapter 7, verse 36. All the fruit-bearing trees for 3 years, the fruit of everything that is eaten will not be gathered. And in the 4th year, its fruit will be accounted holy, and they will offer the first fruits, acceptable before the Most High Eloah, who created heaven and earth and all things. Let them offer in abundance the first of the wine and oil as first fruits on the altar of JAHUAH who receives it. So the time between Pesach and Shavuot are the days of courting. This is the time when the bride and groom get a chance to be acquainted with one another. Each of the 49 days of the counting of the Omer is the incremental cycle moving toward unification of male and female. Step 3. The betrothal, Shavuot. This happens after the first set of 7 sevens. Shavuot is where we are given the Torah, our marriage contract. This is the day we choose to become legally bound to our groom. The marriage is not consummated at this time, but it is legally binding, and the contract is sealed. From the book of Jubilees, we learn that the initial first fruit festival for the grain harvest, Shavuot, was fixed upon the 15th day of the 3rd month, celebrated by Abraham. Jubilees 15, starting with verse 1. In the 5th year of the 4th week of this Jubilee, in the 3rd month, in the middle of the month, Abram celebrated the feast of the firstfruits of the grain harvest, and he offered new offerings on the altar, the firstfruits of the produce, unto Eloah, a heifer and a goat and a sheep on the altar as a burnt offering unto JAHUAH. Their fruit offerings and their drink offerings he offered upon the altar with frankincense. And Eloah appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am Yah Almighty. Approve thyself before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and I will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and Eloah talked with him. It was also celebrated by Jacob. We read further in the book of Jubilees, chapter 44, starting with verse 4. We're speaking about Jacob. Perchance he could see a vision as to whether he should remain or go down. And he celebrated the harvest festival of the firstfruits with old grain, for in the land of Canaan there was not a handful of seed in the land. For the famine was over all the beasts and the cattle and the birds, and also over man. And on the 16th day, so after he had celebrated Shavuot on the 15th, Eloah appeared unto him. So now back on Mount Sinai with Moshe, we join in the story of Exodus 24:7. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that JAHUAH has said we will do, and we will hear. So they're agreeing to this covenant contract. And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold the blood covenant which JAHUAH has made with you concerning all these words. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, and they saw the Eloah of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, like unto the heaven when it is clear. So the representatives went up the mountain to meet with JAHUAH. The betrothal covenant is sealed, and they're up there having their ceremonial meal with Eloah. But he did not lay his hands upon the princes of the sons of Israel, and they saw Eloah, and ate and drank. JAHUAH sealed the deal with the Hebrews that day. When that matter was settled, the groom would depart. He would announce to his bride, I go to prepare a place for you. and he would return to his father's house. Back at his father's house, he would build her a bridal chamber. And JAHUAH said to Moses, "Come up to me into the mountain and wait there, and I will give the tablets of stone and the law and commandments which I have written to teach them." And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of JAHUAH. John 14, starting with verse 2. "In my Father's house there were many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, for that where I am, you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know." We should appreciate that this was a complex undertaking for the bridegroom. He would actually build a separate building on his father's house. The bridal chamber had to be beautiful. One does not honeymoon just anywhere. And it had to be stocked with provision, since the bride and groom were going to remain inside for 7 days. This construction project would take the better part of a year, ordinarily, and the father of the groom would be the judge of when it was finished. And we can see the logic there. Obviously, if it were up to the young man, he would throw up some kind of modest structure and go get his girl. But the father of the groom had been through this previously and was less excited, would be the final judge on when the chamber was ready and when the young man could go claim his bride. Exodus 23:1. "And the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain." Matthew 24:36. "But as to that day and that hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven, except my Father only." The bride, for her part, was obliged to do a lot of waiting. But there was also a lot of work to be done, for she needed to gather her trousseau and prepare the harvests for the final wedding feast at Sukkot. The next 2 sets of 7 sevens are representative not only of the bride counting the days until the groom returns, but the harvest for the wedding party. The continued counting also reminds her of the oath she took until the groom returns. The 4th step, gathering in the wine. Leviticus 23:16. "To the day after the 7th Sabbath, you shall then number 50 days, and you shall offer a new food offering to JAHUAH." From the Dead Sea Scroll, we find a list of first fruits that the priests call festivals, and were included in their schedule year after year for the 6 years that we have recorded, thus being observed at the temple. The calendar followed was an Enochian form of solar division of days, using the spring equinox as the focal point, which evidence of this was found in other Dead Sea Scrolls as well. These additions are particularly important when trying to get a clear picture of the calendrical writings as a whole. Preserved portions include or imply the following festivals: the Feast of First Fruits of Grains, which falls on the 15th day of the 3rd month. The Feast of First Fruits of Wine on the 3rd day of the 5th month. And the Feast of Oil on the 22nd day of the 6th month. Jubilees 32:11. "This ordinance is written that it may be fulfilled from year to year in eating the 2nd tithe before JAHUAH in the place where it has been chosen, and nothing shall remain over from it from this year to the year following. For in its year shall the seed be eaten till the days of the gathering of the seed of the year, and the wine till the days of the wine, and the oil till the days of its season. So we're not to carry over these produce into the next year. They complete their cycle. We're done with the old grain as we bring in the new wine. We all know the parable of putting new wine in old wineskins. What happens? They burst. So this is what he's telling us, that this newness does not overlap with the oldness. In the ancient Near East, with its scarcity of water, wine was a necessity rather than a luxury. So it came to symbolize sustenance and life. Due to its close relationship to the ongoing life of the community in association with grain and oil, wine is also representative of the covenant blessings JAHUAH promised to Israel for obedience, and which he would withhold for disobedience. Wine also represents joy, celebration, and festivity, expressing the abundant blessings of Aloha and, yes, miracles. The occasion was a wedding, an Eastern wedding. Eastern weddings are very different from Western affairs. In Western weddings, the bride is the prominent figure. She enters clad in all her glory. The whole congregation stands and every eye is focused on her. But in Eastern weddings, it is the groom that is prominent. Some of those weddings went on for 2 or 3 days, some for as long as a week, with all of the relatives of both sides of the family joining together for a big celebration. That explains, of course, why the wine ran out. A 2 or 3 day celebration called for so much wine. Mary seizes the opportunity to say, very significantly to her son, they have no wine. She does not ask him to do anything about it. She merely tells him, they have no wine. Woman, he replies, what have you to do with me? Seeming to be satisfied with his response, Mary tells the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. Now 6 stone jars were standing there for the Hebrew rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Yahshua said to them, fill the jars with water. Once they had them filled up to the brim, he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the steward of the feast. So they followed his instructions. When the steward of the feast tasted the water, which now had become wine, and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, every man serves the good wine first, and when men have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. This is the beginning of the signs Yahshua did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples trusted in him. Wine is widely viewed in the Bible as a symbol of happiness, and a wedding is certainly the happiest of occasions. Was Yahshua illustrating the joy in his future kingdom when he returns as the bridegroom, when all sorrow and sadness will be banished? I find it interesting that there are 6 stone water containers. John tells us they were the kind used for ceremonial washing. It was these 6 that Yahshua used to fill with wine. It was on the 6th day all male and female were created. Are these filled vessels of wine the atonement bride of HaMashiach? Then he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, for this is the blood of the Kadash covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Wine being the symbol of the Kadash, that is renewed, rebuilt covenant of restoration between the bride and her kinsman. It is no mistake that the first sign of his manifestation was that of wine, embodying becoming one, becoming intimate with our bridegroom. Are we seeing the restoration of the first fruits of wine as a sign of the time we are in? Is this the embodiment of our cup being filled and lifted up in anticipation of becoming one with our bridegroom? One other mention, the initial miracle of the wine was to prepare Yahshua's disciples for the great work they were to do. John 2:11. This beginning of miracles Yahshua did in Cana of Galilee. And it revealed his glory, and his disciples believed on him. We, as disciples of HaMashiach, too, have great work in preparing for his final return as king. Numbers 28:26. And the day of the new produce, whenever you should bring a new produce, sacrifice of the periods of sevens to Eloah. It will be a holy summoning to you. All servile work you shall not do. The last of the 7 sevens lands us on the Feast of Oil. The 5th step, gathering in the oil. Nehemiah 10, verse 37. And the first fruits of our grain, and the first fruits offering, and the fruit of every tree, of wine and of olive oil, we shall bring to the priests into the treasuries of the house of our Eloah, and of oil to the priests, to the room of the house of our Eloah, and the tithes of our ground to the Levites, and they, the Levites, may have the tithes in all the cities we farm. Shortly before the Feast of Trumpets is the festival of new olive oil. According to the temple scroll found in Qumran, no one could use new olives until some oil had been offered. Falling on the 22nd day of the 6th month each year, it is the first day of the week, which is the last period of 7 sevens. Moshe told Israel that Canaan was a land of olive oil. He also told them that they would acquire olive trees, which they had not planted. From that day down to the present day, the growth of olive trees and the use of its products has played an important part in the history of the land. Oil was used as a commodity of trade or as personal income for various kinds of common daily consumption, as part of the bread diet in the tabernacle grain offerings, as fuel for lamps in the homes or in the tabernacle, as a lubricant for one's hair and skin, sometimes with a special sense of honor, as an aromatic substance, as a medication, or in healing contexts for royal and religious ritual procedures. According to Exodus chapter 30, Moshe was given a special recipe by JAHUAH for sacred anointing oil. This recipe was not to be used by anyone else, and none of it was to be poured on any common person. It was used to anoint the holy items of the tabernacle, the priests, and the Levites. And you shall make it a holy ointment, an ointment compound after the art of the perfumer. It shall be a holy anointing oil. And you shall take the anointing oil and pour it on his head and anoint him. The same idea as present in the consecration of the tabernacle and the priesthood is also practiced in anointing of kings. 1 Samuel 16:13. And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of JAHUAH came mightily upon David from that day forward. We can further document that division in Matthew 24, where one is taken from the field. We are supposed to be in the field doing JAHUAH's work. The one that was taken stopped working for JAHUAH. They stopped seeking his face and stopped working towards growth in the word, the anointed of JAHUAH the Messiah. Their lamps ran out of oil. They lacked wisdom and understanding in JAHUAH's word, which is part of the oil. While one who stayed in the field continued to kindle the fire of JAHUAH, continued making that stand while being equipped with the full lamp of oil. They that are foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. Without oil, we cannot put forth JAHUAH's righteous light. We cannot find our way in this dark world. The foolish failed to gird their loins with all the truth of his word. They failed to obtain enough knowledge and understanding for their lamps. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, I know you not. HaMashiach would say this because the 5 foolish did not understand his plan, and they brought no light to the children of the world when it was needed most. They failed to seek out the scriptures for truth. They failed to knock and ask for the Ruach to reveal his word to them. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish, signifies the division of the end times. Yahshua HaMashiach, the Anointed One, told us, Suppose ye that I come to give peace on earth? I tell you, nay, but rather division. Custom provided that the bride had to have an oil lamp ready, in case the groom came late at night in the darkness, because she had to be ready to travel at a moment's notice. During this long period of waiting, she was referred to as consecrated, set apart, bought with a price. She was truly a lady in waiting, but there was no doubt that her groom would return. Sometimes a young man would depart for a very long time indeed. But of course, he had paid a high price for his bride. Even though there were other young women available, he would surely return for the one with whom he had made a covenant. The wedding of our kinsman will soon be upon us. It is the first fruits that will attend this wedding. Those who made their stand for truth, those willing to work deep into the word and restore the truths that are hidden there. Is the restoration of the oil first fruits a sign that our lamps are being filled and ready for the return of our Mashiach? Yahshua assures us that we should be able to discern the season of his return. Matthew 24, starting with verse 33. So you, likewise, when you see all these things, shall know that it is near, at the doors. Truly I say to you, this generation shall not pass until these things are all fulfilled. This generation, this age, this latter-day age, shall not pass. For JAHUAH to not have a set-aside feast day for such vital commodity would seem out of order for the things of JAHUAH. We must remember that the most profound and holy things of JAHUAH's realm are those things in which Hallel wants to pervert and destroy, including the days where we are to come before JAHUAH in joy and gladness, giving thanks for the bounty he has provided us. Also, the 2 witnesses spoke of in Zechariah 4, pour the oil out of themselves into the bowl of the menorah, which feeds the lamps, who are the very elect of Eloah. Zechariah 4, verse 12. And I answer again and said to him, What are the 2 olive clusters beside the 2 golden pipes, emptying the golden oil from themselves? And he answered to me and said, Do you not know what these are? And I said, No, my lord. And he said, These are the 2 sons of fresh oil, who stand by JAHUAH of the whole earth. This supplies them with strength and assurance, ensuring they have all the oil that is required to bring forth a bright flame. This flame will light the entire world with truth. And let's not forget either that our kinsman was anointed with the oil just before his death. As the latter-day ecclesia, we represent the feet of the Messiah's body, and he is anointed as our king, and we as his ministers. The 3 sets of 7 sevens have been completed, and now there is only 10 days left until the sounding of the trumpet at Yom Teruah, calling the elect to attend the wedding feast. During 6 of these 10 days, the wood is gathered in to be used for repairs and fuel at the temple. Each tribe was chosen by lot for their day of wood gathering. Nehemiah 10:34. And we cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people for the wood offering, to bring into the house of our Eloah, according to the houses of our fathers, at the times appointed year by year, to burn upon the altar of JAHUAH our Eloah, such as written in the law. This offering is listed in the Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q 365 and the Temple Scroll, attesting to the fact that these days were observed by the priests of the first temple. Nehemiah confirms the casting of the lot, although there is not enough information as to why they had to cast the lot to begin with. We could speculate that perhaps there just were not enough people to help with all the work to be done, as they were in the middle of a huge physical restoration of the temple. So they cast lots in order to let JAHUAH assign who would go get the wood, lest there be an argument to the division of work. Again, we can only speculate. The 6th step, the return of the groom, Yom Teruah. The trumpet is sounded and the groom returns and gathers the wedding party in a procession through the streets. 1 Thessalonians 4:16. For Yahshua himself, in a word of command by the voice of an archangel, and with a trumpet of JAHUAH, shall descend from heaven, and the dead in the Messiah shall rise up first. Shofars are blown, and shouts of Baruch haba Hashem Yahweh. Blessed is he who comes in the name of JAHUAH are proclaimed. The bride and her attendants would be able to hear the approaching party giving her a few minutes to get ready. In the final minutes of readiness, the bride is to put on her veil. As the processional walks through the night under the stars in the sky, they have a picture before them in the heavenlies of Abraham's covenant. It is clear to them what is the purpose of this processional: to help fulfill the promise given to Abraham, for they are heirs according to the promise if they are the followers of Messiah Yahshua. Step 7, given atonement, Yom Kippur. The bride is blessed and given atonement just before entering into her new life as wife. A day of fasting and presenting ourselves as humble servants before our King and Bridegroom. The day when the book of life is closed for the year. Leviticus 23, starting with verse 27. Also on the 10th of the 7th month shall be a day of atonement. There shall be a holy gathering, and you shall humble your souls, and shall bring a fire offering to JAHUAH. And you shall do no work in the same day, for it is a day of atonement, to atone for you before JAHUAH our Eloah. For any person who is not humbled in the same day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work in this same day, I shall destroy that person from the midst of his people. You shall do no work. It is an ever-ending statute throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall humble your souls in the 9th of the month at evening. From evening until evening you shall keep your Sabbath. After the 3 sets of 7s, 2 sets of 10s are completed. 10 days from new oil to the blowing of the trumpet, and 10 days from the blowing of the trumpet to atonement. Remember too that it is on the 10th day of the first month that we select the lamb. When the evening commences, the processional delivers the bride to the chuppah, where the marriage ceremony will take place. The groom approaches the chuppah first. Just as JAHUAH approached Moshe first in a cloud, and as Yahshua will return in a cloud to gather his people, the groom is waiting on the bride. She then joins him under the chuppah and stands on his right side. Psalms 54:9. King's daughters were among thy honorable women. Upon thy right hand stand the queen in gold, Ophir. As the bride approaches, she encircles the groom 3 times in remembrance of the 3 sets of oaths she had made to her groom during the harvest season. Hosea 2, starting with verse 19. And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, and in judgment, and in mercies. I will even betroth thee unto me into faithfulness, and thou shalt know JAHUAH. So the 8th and final step is the wedding feast at Sukkot. All the harvest is gathered in, all the oaths have been made, and we enter into the sukkah of our groom, where we are safe and protected, where we linger with our husband on the 8th day. The feast days are Elohah's story of man's redemption and the elect's place as the bride of the Lamb. Each step done in orderly fashion. The order that is given to us by our Creator in His Scriptures, found in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and beyond. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33. For Elohah is not the Elohah of disorder, but of peace, as in all the congregations of the saints, all the called out ones. But all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner. Shortly after Passover, when the man from Galilee cleared the temple the first time, after an evening meeting with Nicodemus, he headed to Judea for a short visit with John, who was baptizing in that region, then headed toward Galilee. On the way, the carpenter from Nazareth, exhausted by the quick trip, stopped in Samaria to rest, where he encountered a woman at the well. Later, when his disciples had returned with food, they said, Master, eat. But he said to them, I have meat to eat that you know not of. Therefore, said the disciples one to another, hath any man brought him aught to eat? Yahshua saith unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. Say not ye, Are there yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the field, for they are white already to harvest. Wheat is white when it is ready for harvest, and yet Yahshua made this statement sometime in the first month, So when the disciples turned around, all they saw were little spikes of green. That was because the wheat had just recently been planted. However, HaMashiach was speaking of a harvest of souls, not the wheat. From the time of his statement in the first month of green ears, plus 4 months would bring us to the 5th month, the time of the wine harvest. Interestingly enough, being HaMashiach's first miracle. Revelation 14, starting with verse 1. And I saw, and behold, a Lamb standing upon Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father being written upon their foreheads. And I heard a sound from out of the heaven, as a sound of many waters, and as a sound of great thunder. And I heard the sound which was as harpists harping with their harps. And they sing a new ode before the throne, and before the 4 living creatures, and the elders, the celestial council, the hosts of heaven. And no one was able to learn the ode, except the 144,000, the ones being bought from the earth. These are the ones not tainted with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones following the Lamb wherever he should go. These were bought by JAHUAH from men as firstfruits to Eloah and to the Lamb. The word used in the LXX for firstfruits is arkomi, meaning to commence, as in order of time, rehearse from the beginning. So with that in mind, let's read Ezekiel 20:40. That upon my holy mountain, upon the high mountain of Israel, says Eloah JAHUAH, there all the house of Israel shall serve to me unto the end upon the land. And there I will favorably receive them, and there I shall watch your rehearsal, and the rehearsal of your offerings, all of your sanctified things. In a scent of pleasant aroma, I will favorably receive you in my leading you from out of the peoples, and to take you from out of the places in which you were dispersed in them. And I shall be sanctified in you before the eyes of the people, and you shall realize that I am the Creator in my bringing you into the land of Israel, into which I lift up my hand and give to your father. This concludes the study of the first fruits of oil and wine. We hope it has blessed you as much as it has blessed us to share it with you. So until we meet again, I want to wish you shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.